fight fans? This is episode 8 of Anchored Aggression. I'm one of your hosts, Brett Cagle, joined today by Anthony Ballister. We've got a lot of fights to break down from last weekend. We had Bellator Belfast, as well as a UFC Apex card featuring Rose Namajunas and Amanda Ribas. You want to talk about Bellator first?
Yeah, we can start there.
So in the main event, Corey Anderson finally becomes a world champion, defeating Carl Moore in Carl Moore's home country of Ireland. Moore really had his native fans behind him in this one. He actually had a really tight armbar there in round 2 that looked like he could have finished the fight. I don't know how Anderson got out of it, but that was probably Carl Moore's best moment in that fight. I thought Corey Anderson did a really good job getting to the takedown and knowing where he needed the fight to go for him to win, and he grinded out a decision victory. What'd you make of the main event?
Yeah, I thought, like you said, besides that almost submission, I thought Corey Anderson pretty much controlled the whole fight. He won it unanimously, basically 5 rounds to 0. So he's definitely dominant. I'm glad to see, him win the fight, finally get a belt unanimously. So it was great for him. I was very impressed for him, and I'm interested to see, who he defends the belt against first.
Yeah, I am too, and I thought it was a good showing for Carl Moore. I know he got shut out, and he's probably going to have to shore up some of that takedown defense at the elite level. But Carl looked like he was good off his back. You don't see a lot of light heavyweights throwing up submissions like that. On the feet, I thought that he was getting the better of the exchanges early with Corey, and then late it seemed like Corey's takedowns might have tired Carl out, allowing Corey to land more on the feet in the 4th and 5th round. But I really liked Corey Anderson's performance, and I think there's some guys out there that could really challenge him now that Vadim Nemkov is now a heavyweight and has vacated the title. Yeah,
100%. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where they go. Obviously, he's probably going to be fighting a guy who's, I know the merger between PFL and Bellator, but obviously he's probably going to fight someone in the Bellator rankings. So definitely be interesting to see. There's obviously some good options out there, so I'll be interested to see who they pick.
Yeah, a big name was, Grant Neal has been ranked here in the 185 and 205 pound weight class, but he was just upset by Luke Traynor this weekend, who moved to 9-1, I believe. It's either 8-1 or 9-1. There's a lot of stuff that's shaken up right now at 205, and there's going to be a decision that has to be made by the PFL brass, who they want up there next, and I'm certainly going to be interested, but whoever it is certainly going to have to defend the takedown.
100%. And then we also had some other good fights. We had, Patricio Pitbull, who a lot of people were writing off, hadn't got a win in quite some time. His last fight, he was trying to fight with the PFL and the versus Bellator champions. That fight didn't go through due to his opponent being injured. So we finally got to see him going up against Jeremy Kennedy. And wow, what a way to come back. With a TKO win, get him back in the win column. And I was very, very happy for Patricio. He's been a great fighter for a long time, and he's someone that I always root for.
Yeah, arguably the greatest fighter in Bellator's history, if you want to look at his credentials. 2-weight world champion, knocked out Michael Chandler, and also defeated AJ McKee. So, he's one of the best fighters Bellator's ever seen. And you were really on your picks for Bellator last week, going 3 for 3 with Fabian Edwards, Patricio Pitbull, and Corey Anderson. So, you were all over this fight. I counted Pitbull out. I thought that he was, going to be, older in his career. He had just lost twice in a row. And Jeremy Kennedy has a good ground game. And Jeremy Kennedy actually caught him in this fight before getting finished. This was a vintage performance from Patricio Pitbull, who really had to dig down deep in that round after getting stunned and then eventually coming back and stopping Kennedy in that same 5-minute span. That was, a really great performance by Pitbull, and he shows that he's still dangerous on the feet, still has that power and the killer instinct to get you out of there when you're hurt too.
Yeah, and he had a lot of things going against him. Like we said before, at these weight classes, the older fighters typically lose, especially when they're on sort of decline and they're not in the prime anymore. But, Patricio dug deep and got the win. And I'm glad to see him get the win. As we said, for other fighters, I think this one was more important to him because I think having another loss to a guy like Jeremy Kennedy wouldn't have been a good look for him. I don't know who he would have fought next. So I'm very, very happy for him. And I think, Kennedy will bounce back too. Maybe they'll have a rematch or he'll fight somebody else. But I think, both these fighters will continue their career, and I'm very happy that we'll get to see Patricio Pitbull a little bit more.
Yeah, and, what I'm interested to see here is, what AJ McKee's next move is, because they just announced in Bellator that Usman Nurmagomedov, the 155-pound champion, will be fighting Alexander Shabliy in Paris. that's going to put AJ McKee on the back burner for, at least 4 months with that fight card happening in May. So maybe he wants to go down to 145 pounds and set up this trilogy fight with Patricio Pitbull. They are tied at 1 apiece. McKee got him by submission with a guillotine. Some people think it was stopped early because Pitbull did not tap or go out. And in the second fight, Pitbull came back and won a decision. So I honestly, if McKee can make that 145-pound weight class, he's kind of stuck in limbo right now. And giving AJ McKee a title, I feel like is something that he would be interested in with his, with him being one of the most talented fighters outside the UFC. I think he really needs a championship to solidify, how good he is to the masses.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned AJ McKee. I know when we did the first podcast when we're talking about Bellator, we were saying, who would we want to see AJ McKee fight? And the first name that popped up in my head was Patricio Pitbull. So now that we've seen Pitbull fight, and then you brought up AJ McKee, I think that's definitely, the direction they should head in. And I would love to see that trilogy fight. I know McKee, being as talented as he is, much more skilled and much more better all around than I think Kennedy is. So I'm not sure how Patricio Pitbull would do with that. But like you said, he's beat him before. He's coming off of a win. And that would be a very exciting fight that wouldn't surprise me to see go either way.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe the most talented fighter on all of Bellator's roster versus the greatest fighter on Bellator's roster when you look at accolades. So, and there's bad blood between the two and a rivalry already that's 1 apiece. I don't think that there's really anywhere else to go if McKee can make 145 pounds again.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. So then in the next fight, obviously we had Fabian Edwards getting the win over Aaron Jeffrey. You said this fight was going to be the closest of the 3, and you were probably absolutely right. It was definitely a close fight, a very competitive 2-1. It was unanimous, but it was a very competitive 2-1. Fabian Edwards, I thought, did get the win, but it was very close. I didn't think the fight was going to be close. I thought it was going to be pretty much one-sided. I thought Fabian Edwards would mop the floor with Aaron Jeffries, but you called it. You said it was going to be close. You said Aaron Jeffries is a guy that we have to respect, and even in defeat, I definitely respect Aaron Jeffries a lot more coming out of this fight. How did you see this one?
Yeah, Aaron Jeffrey is certainly tough. He is well-rounded, but this one really came down to damage for me. And when Fabian Edwards was on the feet, he did land the more damaging blows. I knew that Jeffrey was going to try and push him towards the cage and kind of control time in the clinch and kind of stall out some portions of rounds while looking for takedowns. But he just didn't have, the damage or the output in the clinch that Edwards did, and then at range, Edwards was kind of eating him up with leg kicks and jabs. There wasn't really a standout moment in the fight from either one. It was really close and competitive, both jostling for position against the cage, and then, Jeffrey kind of trying to survive on the feet while looking for takedowns. So, I thought Edwards won this fight. I also had it scored for him, and I'm interested to see his rematch with Johnny Eblen.
Yeah, 100%. If you were going to ask me who I would like to see him fight, that's exactly who I would like to say. I know Johnny Eblen got the best of him last time, but Johnny Eblen didn't look that good in his last fight. So it'll be interesting to see those two guys match up again, because who knows if Johnny Eblen's going to be the fighter he was when he fought Fabian Edwards, or is he going to be the fighter that we saw in his last fight? So that'd be very interesting to see. Maybe Johnny Eblen didn't take his last training camp seriously and underestimate his opponent. I definitely think that would be a very exciting rematch. And I really don't see where else you could go for Fabian Edwards. I think he pretty much would beat any other fighter that they could put against him other than Johnny Eblen.
Yeah, and honestly, in that fight, their first fight, I thought that Fabian, won at least one of those early rounds. When Eblen cut him open with an elbow on the ground, he then finished him in the next round, because I think the vision of Edwards was really impaired after getting the elbow. Now, all credit to Johnny Eblen. He is the one that forced the elbow, or forced the cut due to the elbow. So fair play there. But at the same time, Johnny Eblen wasn't having substantial success on the feet against Edwards either. So he is a difficult matchup for anybody in the division, and with his athleticism, it really only takes one shot too. Yeah,
I agree. Now, is there anything else on the Bellator pay-per-view that you wanted to speak about?
No, I thought that I mentioned the Luke Trainer versus Grant Neal fight. I thought that Luke did a really good job pulling an upset there. Some other guys put out some good performances as well, but we got some fights to talk about in the UFC too.
Yeah, 100%. We didn't get a chance to recap last week's fight. We had the Amanda Ribas versus Rose Namajunas fight. I thought Namajunas bounced back after her last loss. She looked sharp. She actually got her first win in the UFC's women's flyweight division. It was great to see her bounce back. Her being a future Hall of Famer. You don't want to see fighters like that lose. This puts her in a great position to maybe be a fight or two away from maybe competing for the title again. So it would have been tough to see her lose back-to-back fights. That maybe forced her back down a division. So it's definitely great to see her get bounced back. Also on this card, I thought Carl Williams and Justin Tafa was a good fight. Tafa, when he got on the feet, I thought, he was hurting Carl Williams. But then every time Carl Williams took him to the ground, he pretty much controlled the rest of the fight. And that's pretty much what happened. Once it got to the ground, he controlled Tafa. So I think he won the fight 3 rounds to 0. I like to see Carl Williams fight a ranked heavyweight in his next match. Maybe against a heavyweight that could grapple so they could match him. Some other thoughts from the card. I thought Peyton Talbot was the performance of the night. He put on a masterclass in strikes with a combination of knees, elbows, everything. And I thought he was unbelievable. And a lot of people don't know if he's ready for a ranked fighter, but I think he right now should be fighting a ranked bantamweight. I think he's got so much potential. He reminds me a lot of Sugar Sean O'Malley in the way he fights. So I love to see him fight against a ranked opponent. The fight of the night for me was Muhammad Usman versus Mick Parkin. Even though we said it should have been the main card, I thought that fight was a banger of a fight. Both guys went, toe-to-toe with each other, strike for strike. It was a brawl. I thought Usman got round 1, but I thought Parkin won round 2 and 3. I thought he got the better of him. I think he did a lot more damage, in particular with the leg kicks. But both fighters looked great. I don't think either fighter should be discouraged. Usman seemed like he was a little upset, thought he maybe got the fight and thought he maybe won. But I think they picked the right guy. And, I would like to see Parkin fight a ranked fighter as well. Maybe a guy like Tai Tuivasa, a guy that's on the decline who's in the rankings. I think that would be a perfect matchup for those two guys. What were your thoughts on the fight card last week?
Yeah, I really liked about everything you said. I thought Peyton Talbot also was the performance of the night. He was fighting another young guy in Simon. And, that was a matchup of 25 versus 23-year-olds. We could potentially see that again down the line. But as far as the main event's concerned, Rose really showed her championship, material in this one. She was able to keep it on the feet where she wanted, was the superior kickboxer at range. Ribas was trying to get to the fight to the floor. There were certain times in the main event that she had submission attempts that looked close on leg locks and certain other things. But Rose did a good job of, reversing transitions and actually getting on top herself at some portions during the fight as well. I thought that Rose won the fight 3-2. I agreed with the judges' decisions there. I thought that it was a good performance by her. She called out the winner of Erin Blanchfield versus Manon Fiorot coming up this weekend in Atlantic City. Fiorot was the last person to defeat her, so Daniel Cormier and other MMA pundits didn't really know where that call-out was coming from, but I wouldn't mind seeing her fight Blanchfield if Blanchfield was to lose next weekend, but Rose is certainly going to have to take a step back and kind of wait and see how the top of the division unfolds here. As far as Carl Williams and Justin Tafa is concerned, I think that was a striker versus grappler matchup. Carl Williams came into the fight and had landed 4 takedowns per fight on his opponents, so I thought he really did what everybody thought he was going to do. If you listened to your Bellator picks and my UFC picks, you would have made a lot of money last week. But Carl Williams put on a good performance. I actually wouldn't mind seeing him fight Mick Parkin from the earlier fight. I think they both kind of need somebody who has, we need to see where these guys are at. I think Mick Parkin will be good enough to maybe stay off his back and then force Carl Williams to stand and trade with him, kind of like he did with Usman this last weekend. Was I missing a third fight there? What was the in between? What do we have? Co-main event Talbot.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed everything that I stated. Yeah. I don't mind that pick. Put the two guys that won against each other. If they're not going to give them a ranked fighter, why not give the pretty much the two best guys outside the rankings against each other? That'd be a good matchup. Like you said, see who's the cream of the crop of those guys, and then maybe the winner of that can finally get a ranked opponent. Now, I know you got
your thoughts on the Parkin versus Usman fight, though. After Usman won that first round, and we both had him win in the first round, Were you surprised he didn't go for any takedown attempts the rest of the fight when he already had a round in the bag?
Yeah, I was 100%. I agree. I thought he would. I thought he'd maybe try to, play it safe. If it's a 3-round fight, if you already got 1 round, you only got to go 1 for 2. So, yeah, I think he made a mistake. I think his fight IQ had maybe questioned a little bit after that fight. But, he'll bounce back. Like I said, I think it still was a close fight. It was a very competitive 2-1. Now, I wanted to ask you, I know you mentioned you like to see those 2 guys fight against each other, the 2 heavyweight winners. Now, do you agree with me? Do you think Peyton Talbot should get a ranked fighter next?
Yeah, I do. And we're going to see where, some of these other young guys in that division shape up. Christian Rodriguez had a win over Simon. I think that might be an interesting matchup. We just saw Christian Rodriguez compete last weekend. So there's a lot of good guys in that division right now. And, it might be the deepest division in all of the UFC. So there's going to be a wide variety of people to pick from for him. So I'm interested to see him compete again. And, with as dominant of a performance as he put on, he'll probably be able to come back by May or June. So he might get rebooked pretty quick.
Yeah, and the thing is, what's going for him, too, is he's a very exciting fighter. I know a lot of the boring fighters that like to grapple, they kind of get pushed to the side. They have to do a lot more work, win a lot more fights. But with him being so exciting and so polarizing, and after that weekend, everybody's talking about him. So, he's got the fans behind him. And I think Dana White, sees money when he sees him and dollar signs. So why not book him against a ranked fighter, either on a pay-per-view card, or I wouldn't even mind seeing him maybe headline a main event for a UFC fight night at some point.
Yeah, I think he could certainly be a co-main event for a fight night to start out. Got into the main card for the first time this weekend, and that's certainly a huge accomplishment for someone that's 25 years old, and that just shows that the UFC is going to try and push you and is putting you in a position to be successful. So I think the UFC hype machine is going to get behind Peyton Talbot here, and I think we're going to have an American contender sooner than later.
Yeah, and now we brings us to our the card this coming up with the main event. We have another woman flyweight. I think this fight's going to factor in a lot to where they go for the title contention. We got Erin Blanchfield going up against Mayan Fiorot. I think this is a huge fight. Obviously, Alexa Grasso versus Shevchenko is probably going to be the next fight. They're going to be on the Ultimate Fighter. But I wouldn't be surprised if the winner of this fight gets the next title shot after them. Why they wait? Both fighters haven't lost in UFC. I think both of them are phenomenal. I think these 2 fighters are maybe stronger than what we had in the last main event. But I just think right now, I think Fiorot's on a tear. So I'm going to go with her by decision. But how do you see this main event going?
Yeah, I think this is certainly a better fight than last weekend. We have a striker versus grappler one in this. Erin Blanchfield, to me, is one of the most talented fighters I've ever seen in women's mixed martial arts. 24 years old right now. If she does go like you're saying, and as the UFC is planning it to me right now, and wins this fight and then takes on the winner of Grasso and Shevchenko, she could potentially, depend on timing, be the youngest women's champion in UFC history. So there's a lot to be said about that. Her ground game is tremendous. She's turned back contenders like Talia Santos, and we saw how Talia Santos went in there with Shevchenko and was the first real person to test her and take her into a controversial decision. I'm going to take the talent of Blanchfield in this one. And, when you go and you see her versus Molly McCann's a dangerous striker, and she was able to take Molly McCann off her feet from the opening bell. I think the fight intelligence of Erin Blanchfield is one of her best weapons. I think she knows how to win, depending upon the matchup. I think she knows that Fiorot is going to be the better kickboxer on the feet, and she's going to need to take the fight to the ground. Now Leah McCourt is the only girl to defeat Manon Fiorot, and Leah McCourt is a black belt in judo and is the number 1 contender in Bellator right now. So those girls kind of went their different ways, McCourt going to Bellator and Fiorot ending up in the UFC. But her only loss is to Leah McCourt, who does have a ground game. And if Erin Blanchfield goes in there and takes a page out of her book, she might be victorious this weekend. That's how I'm going to go with it, is Blanchfield by decision. But obviously, if she doesn't get that takedown, Fiorot could have her way on the feet.
Yeah, this fight could definitely go, a million different ways. Wouldn't be surprised if, Fiorot wins by finish. Wouldn't be surprised to see either woman get the win by decision either. So it's definitely a very exciting fight. And like you said, Both fighters are unbelievable. They're both got a lot of promise and potential. Both on crazy win streaks, and it's definitely very exciting. Like I said, more exciting than I think last fight, and that's no shame to last fight. Last week's main event was a good fight too, but I think this one is just a step above it. And like I said, this is definitely going to have a lot to say on where the division's heading.
Yeah, absolutely. I just am going to put my eggs in the basket of Blanchfield. I think that she is going to be the youngest champion in female mixed martial arts history. And, I think that she's going to be able to beat Fiorot this weekend.
Yeah, and, I wouldn't blame you. If you look at her resume and what she's accomplished up to this point, it's hard to bet against her. I just think, for Fiorot coming off of a win against Namajunas and the way she's looked, I'm just going to ride with her. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see it go either way.
Do you think that there's going to be a size advantage for Fiorot in this one? Do you think that's going to matter a lot? I believe that she's 5'7" compared to 5'4" for Blanchfield. Do you think that's a big deal in this one, considering she's probably going to use her length to try and keep Blanchfield off of her?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's going to be one of her keys to victory. I'm guessing probably in her training camp, her coaches have probably emphasized that because that's her best way of winning the fight. Keeping her at distance, keeping it off the ground, and, keeping her away with those jabs.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think we got a good main event matchup, too.
Yeah, 100%. I think this may be my prediction for fight of the night. We got Vincent Luque going up against Luque-Joaquin Buckley. Luque is a fighter who's been in a lot of big fights against a lot of great fighters for a long time now. I think, he's a great litmus test for welterweights who are trying to see if they should be ranked amongst the best in the world. I think if you get past Luque, you're, an elite, top 10, top 15 fighter. And if not, you got to go back to the drawing board. He's one of those, as we said before, one of those gatekeepers for the, for his division. And I think, on Luque-Joaquin Buckley, he's on a 2-fight win streak. I think he's got great knockout power. He's only 29 years old, coming into his prime. I think Luque, he might be on a slight decline, losing 2 of his last 3 fights. So I'm going to go with Buckley to win the fight by knockout or TKO.
I think that's the way he wins it if he does win it. He's a very explosive athlete, like you're saying, 29 years old. He's coming on, as some people might think Luque might be coming on the back half of his career. But surprisingly, Luque's been through a lot of these wars, but he's only 32 years of age. He just defeated Rafael dos Anjos last time out. And I think that how this fight's outcome is going to go really depends on how Luque fights this one. Whether Luque takes this fight to the ground or whether he tries to stand and trade with Luque-Joaquin Buckley. Now, Buckley can knock him out. So the most danger for Luque would be to stand and trade with Buckley. But it's going to be hard for him to take him down as well, because Buckley's a very physically strong athlete and is short and stocky. It's not like he's one of these lengthy guys who can get to his legs and wrap him up and get to the ground. So he's got good takedown defense too. So I like your pick for Buckley by knockout. I think that if he wins, that's how he gets it done. But I'm going to take Luque decision. I think that, he's going to go in there and mix it up. I think he's going to put jabs and stuff on Buckley, but then also look for takedowns and try and be more multifaceted than Buckley in this one.
Yeah, and honestly, when I was looking at this fight, I originally was going to pick Luque. But then when I further look into this, I, noticed, obviously, we've seen Luque get knocked out before by, Jeff Neal. So we've seen it before, and, I think Buckley, could do the same thing. I really wanted to pick Luque in this. Like I said, honestly, I had Luque winning the fight. But, up until today, I decided to switch it. I'm going on a limb here and picking Buckley. But like I said, I really wanted to go Luque, and if I would pick Luque, I would go by decision. And if Buckley wins, I think it has to be by TKO or knockout. And I think that's the path for victory for both fighters.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on the analysis there.
And then, the other fight we want to bring up on the main card, we got Chris Weidman, former middleweight champion, go up against another, great fighter, Bernardo Silva. Both fighters are on losing streaks, but I still think Bruno Silva is still, a solid fighter. He's 6 years younger. At this point, I just wish Chris Weidman would hang it up. I don't want to see him take any more damage. But I got Bernardo Silva winning this fight by TKO. And I think this might actually send Chris Weidman to officially retire.
Yeah, I think this is the last one. I think the UFC is doing him a favor here and saying, hey, Chris, we're going to be back with a fight night card in Atlantic City. This is on the East Coast. You're going to have a lot of your fan base here. Let's do this thing one more time. You're not on title contention. We're going to give you a winnable opponent. And I think that, Chris is old. Chris is taking punishment, and a lot of us fans of the sport are big Chris Weidman fans and don't want to see that, especially after the leg injury, and then he comes back and gets kicked by Brad Tavares over and over, and almost gets kicked to being immobile in that fight. So that was a hard sight to see. But when I go and I look at this matchup, Bruno Silva's lost 7 times by submission, and Chris Weidman is an All-American wrestler. And the last thing to go for him is going to be the wrestling. He might not be as coordinated and have the power in the hands that he had when he was 25, 30 years old, but he's still going to have that wrestling. And if he can get this fight to the ground, I think there's a path to victory for submission here. It's just, I don't know the training camp that Chris Weidman's had coming into this one. He is going to have the home fan base behind him. If he can go in there and land that one takedown, he might be able to go and get like an arm triangle on Bruno Silva, very similar to when we saw him submit Kelvin Gastelum with an arm triangle. And Kelvin Gastelum's also a very powerful and dangerous striker, much like Bruno Silva. We saw Bruno fight Alex Pereira and go to decision, so we know that, in a stand-up battle, so we know that he's very good on the feet, a very tough competitor, but he struggled with these guys on the ground as well. So I think this is really a pick-em matchup, and I'm interested to see where you're going in it.
Yeah, so obviously, like I said, I'm going to go Bruno Silva by KO. And so you're going Chris Weidman by submission?
Yeah, I think I am. I think I'm going to go Chris Weidman by submission. I think that he's going to be motivated enough to perform one last time in front of the East Coast fans.
Now, would you say if, Silva does win the fight, do you think his path to victory has to be knockout? It can't be a decision?
Knockout. I think that if Weidman gets stuck on the feet with Silva, it's going to be a tough 15 minutes. And, I think Bruno can take anything Chris can give on the feet. And I don't know about Chris's mobility anymore with his legs. And, I don't know if the punching power is still there either. So, I think he's going to have to get the fight to the ground and use the technique that he's had from being a lifelong grappler in a black belt as well as an All-American wrestler. So I'm really interested to see, and this one is 2 veterans in very different stylistic matchup, and this is kind of what the UFC's famous for on these fight night cards, is putting on competitive, different style matchups that us fight fans really appreciate.
Yeah, 100%. That's what makes these fights interesting. Like I said, with the stylistically, it's definitely going to be interesting. Both fighters probably can win the fight, by decision. But yeah, if Weidman's going to want to win it, I think 100% has to be by submission. I know we got some other great fights on the main card and the prelims. One that I would want to bring up is I like to see Bill Algo against Kyle Nelson. I think those are 2 solid fighters. I think both can grapple well. And I'm excited to see those 2 guys in the octagon with each other. Is there any other fights that you would like to bring up before we get out of here?
Yeah, Ultimate Fighter alum Andre Petroski is fighting Jacob Malkoun. I think that he's an interesting underdog play. Malkoun is 7-3. Petroski is 10-3. Petroski holds wins over guys like Gerald Meerschaert. We've seen Meerschaert recently pick up wins over top contenders. So, if you got a win over a gatekeeper like Meerschaert, that means you can probably stick around near the top 15 rankings. I think that at plus 200, that's a really good number for Petroski against Malkoun, who struggled sometimes against grapplers. And Petroski is, an unbelievable jiu-jitsu guy and a very strong physical athlete, a lot like Sean Brady almost. Not quite as good as Sean Brady on the ground, but very physically strong and can get to submissions.
Yeah, I think this is actually a really good card. I actually like this card a little bit better than last week. I think it's a little bit more deeper. We didn't have time because we weren't able to record the earlier podcast because we had, important things going on. Yeah. But obviously, when we speak Sunday, we'll go further in depth with how these fights actually go. We'll break down all the main card. We'll talk about some of the prelims. And I can't wait to break down this card in its entirety and see how some of these fights go. And I'm really excited for the Sunday podcast.
Yeah, I am too. I think we'll have a new contender for women's 125 pounds. And, then I think we're also going to get a couple good fights and some ranked matchups at welterweight. So it'll be fun.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we see, a new guy ranked in the welterweight like a Buckley if he gets this win.
Absolutely. This to me, I don't know if you agree with this. I think this is the biggest fight of Buckley's entire career. I can't say the same for Luque, but this is a huge opportunity for Buckley.
Yeah, I definitely think he's got a lot to gain and also a lot to lose. I think Vincent Luque, he's, like you said, he's been in a lot of fights for a long time. If he loses this fight, he probably just fights against another up-and-coming fighter. Where, if Buckley loses, he's going to have to go back to the drawing board. So he's definitely got a lot more to lose, but also a lot more to gain as well. Because if Luque wins, it's like, okay, he's expected to win. He doesn't move up the rankings, nothing happens. But Buckley, man, if he wins this fight, he puts himself on the map, and a lot of people are going to be talking about him next week.
Absolutely, and he could even go and be in a main event. The UFC likes to play that spinning kick that he won knockout of the year with, one of the greatest knockouts in UFC history. So they certainly can play that over and over in a promo package if he wins this weekend and find him a fight for a main event, certainly.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, I'm real excited to watch this, and I can't wait to break it down in the next podcast.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, fight fans. We'll see you guys on Sunday with a recap show. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
See ya.